All right, let's dive right in. Think of your body not just as a random collection of organs, but as a highly programmable, deeply interconnected architecture. Every single day, your physiology is operating as this brilliantly complex system, one that's governed by light, neurochemistry, and believe it or not, your own breath. In this explainer, we're going to break down the first principles of exactly how you wake up, how you achieve peak alertness, and how you can biologically signal your nervous system to recover. But first, we have to address a pretty glaring contradiction. Why do we spend our mornings fighting our biology rather than optimizing it? I mean, think about it. Our modern stressful morning routines completely ignore millions of years of evolutionary neurobiology. We reach for digital stimulation or pharmacologics before our brain has even finished its natural waking sequence. To really optimize our state, we need to understand what is actually happening in the brain the second we open our eyes. And that brings us to sleep inertia. Look, if you've ever woken up feeling like you're literally moving underwater, well, this is the biological reason why. It's a state of absolute molecular grogginess, a transitional neurobiological phase of cognitive impairment and sensory motor deceleration. Under normal conditions, this whole process lasts about 15 to 30 minutes. And it happens because waking up, especially if you're coming out of deep, slow-wave sleep, forces the brain into a really chaotic transition. It has to rapidly shift from this state of deep neural inhibition to the high-frequency demands of active wakefulness. Now, the sheer volume of what happens next is just staggering. Within 30 to 45 minutes of waking up, the master clock in your brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, commands your adrenal glands to secrete a massive 50% surge in cortisol. This is known as the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. Now, let's be clear, this is not a stress response. Actually, it's a completely healthy, essential alerting mechanism. This transient endocrine burst mobilizes your metabolic resources, regulates your immune system, and perfectly primes your entire cardiovascular system for the day ahead. So your body already has this brilliant built-in wake-up protocol, right? But here is exactly where we sabotage it, creating what we call a tired but wired collision. If the very first thing you do is check a glowing smartphone, you trigger these unpredictable micro-releases of dopamine mixed with urgent notifications. And guess what? Your amygdala processes those notifications as acute threats. So you're stacking artificial, digital stress directly on top of your natural cortisol awakening response. This causes a catastrophic biological feedback loop. It elevates your baseline blood pressure and leaves you in a state of systemic anxiety before you've even gotten out of bed. So if the smartphone is the wrong trigger, what's the right one? Well, the answer lies right at the cellular level with something called melanopsin. Now, melanopsin is a specialized photopigment found in the retina of your eye. But here's the catch. It doesn't actually help you see shapes or colors. It's a non-visual photoreceptor. Think of it as the ultimate molecular switch. Its sole job is to detect light intensity and communicate directly with the core circadian clock in your brain. It literally dictates your biological timeline for sleep, hormone release, and metabolism. And the sensitivity of this switch is incredibly precise. The melanoptic absorption peaks right around 460 to 480 nanometers. That happens to be the exact wavelength of natural blue daylight. When these specific photons hit the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in your eye, that signal travels straight down the retinohypothalamic tract and right into your brain. This instantly suppresses any residual melatonin, clearing away that sleepiness, and acts as the natural trigger to amplify that healthy cortisol surge we talked about earlier. Which brings us to the phase response curve. You see, your body's circadian rhythm responds differently to light depending on exactly when it hits your eyes relative to your core body temperature minimum, which usually happens just a couple of hours before you wake up. The causal relationship here is fascinating. Getting bright, natural light early in the morning, right after that temperature minimum, triggers what's called a phase advance shift. It literally resets your master clock earlier. This ensures your melatonin onset happens right on schedule later that night, so you can sleep perfectly. Okay, so we've got our light and our cortisol sorted. Now let's look at a topic of intense scientific debate, the exact timing of your morning caffeine. This essentially pits chronobiology, which is the study of our biological rhythms, against neuropharmacology, the study of how drugs actually affect our nervous system. To really understand this debate, we need to break the molecule down from first principles. Caffeine doesn't actually create energy. I know, shocking, right? Instead, it acts as a competitive antagonist. Throughout the day, your brain builds up a molecule called adenosine. This binds to A1 and A2A receptors, signaling sleep pressure. Caffeine simply comes in and occupies those exact same receptor sites. It acts like a molecular mask, temporarily preventing your endogenous adenosine from delivering its inhibitory somnogenic signals. So how do we practically apply this science? Let's objectively compare the two camps here. On one hand, the chronobiological theory argues that you should delay caffeine by about 90 to 120 minutes. Why? To spare your natural cortisol awakening response from unnecessary hyperstimulation, and to give your brain time to clear out residual sleep adenosine before you block those receptors. On the flip side, the neuropharmacological counterargument points out that adenosine levels actually rise rapidly within minutes of waking, regardless of what you do, so taking caffeine immediately will block those receptors just the same. Ultimately, the choice really depends on whether you suffer from a severe afternoon crash. If you do, delaying it might help sustain the effect. But while we agonize over the exact minute to drink our coffee, we often completely ignore a massive physical impairment. Even a mild 1 to 2% drop in your overnight fluid mass profoundly impairs your short-term memory, attention, and processing speed. During the night, just through basic respiration and perspiration, you lose water, and your brain physically struggles to maintain basic neural signaling when it's depleted of water and electrolytes. And this cascade right here reveals the systemic panic that even mild dehydration causes in your body. It triggers the renal-adrenal dehydration cascade. When you wake up dehydrated, your plasma osmolality rises. Your hypothalamus detects this concentrated blood and immediately releases arginine vasopressin to force your kidneys to conserve water. Simultaneously, your blood pressure drops, activating the ROS pathway. This forces your adrenal cortex to secrete aldosterone, basically scrambling to retain sodium and excrete potassium, just to stabilize your blood volume. Your brain is literally forcing your kidneys and adrenal glands into overdrive just to keep you upright. To truly respect just how vital this adrenal electrolyte axis is for human survival, we only have to look at the clinical extreme, Addison's disease. This is an autoimmune destruction of the adrenal cortex. Patients with Addison's simply cannot produce adequate cortisol or aldosterone. The results? Their bodies aggressively waste sodium and dangerously retain potassium. This triggers profound, debilitating fatigue, dangerous hypotension, and serious cardiovascular instability. It proves without a doubt just how dependent our daily energy really is on salt, water, and adrenal hormones. So, how do you actually know if your own fluid homeostasis is off? Well, the clinical markers are pretty clear. If your urine-specific gravity hits 1.030 or higher, or your plasma osmolality breaches 290, or if you see more than a 1% loss in your morning body mass, your system is compromised. Rehydrating with plain water is a good start, sure, but the science dictates that you really need electrolytes, specifically sodium, potassium, and magnesium, upon waking to rapidly restore this balance and spare your adrenal glands. Okay, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. We've optimized your light, we've protected your cortisol, and we've restored your hydration. But all of this chemistry feeds into an overarching neurological matrix, the autonomic nervous system. This is the master control board. It's the system that dictates whether your baseline physiological state is one of chronic stress or deep restorative recovery. And arguably the most important lever on that entire control board is the vagus nerve. This is your biological brake pedal. It's the primary neural superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system. When your vagus nerve is properly stimulated, it shifts your entire body right out of that sympathetic fight-or-flight activation. It lowers your heart rate, reduces systemic inflammation, and allows you to actually rest and digest. Which brings us to a really profound biological realization. Your breath acts as the remote control for your nervous system, and it is always accessible. Think about it. Respiration is the absolute only physiological function that is both entirely involuntary, keeping you alive while you sleep, and completely voluntary. By consciously altering your breathing, you can manually override involuntary autonomic stress responses. It's quite literally a scientifically validated biohack straight into your own brainstem. Let's look at the exact mechanics of how to actually use that remote control, starting with box breathing, or the 4-4-4-4 method. You inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and pause for 4. The magic here isn't mystical at all, it's completely mechanical. The rigid rhythmic structure forces your heart rate to slow down. This steady cadence sends immediate afferent signals right up to the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, confirming that the environment is safe, thereby neutralizing acute anxiety. Now, if you're dealing with deeper tension or maybe some insomnia, you can shift to the 4-7-8 method. You inhale for 4, hold for 7, and exhale for a long 8 counts. The crucial point here is that extended exhale. Biologically, whenever your exhale is longer than your inhale, you are directly stimulating that vagus nerve we just talked about. This rapidly downshifts your blood pressure and literally helps clear stress hormones from your bloodstream. Or perhaps your goal is long-term nervous system resilience. In that case, remember this number: 5. This represents coherent breathing, taking exactly 5 to 6 breaths per minute. At this specific frequency, you are basically synchronizing your respiratory rate with your cardiovascular system, maximizing something called heart rate variability, or HRV. A high HRV is the ultimate biological marker of a flexible, adaptable, and highly resilient nervous system. And the long-term payoff of this consistent regulation? It's actual neuroplasticity. You increase your vagal tone. You lower your baseline systemic cortisol throughout the entire day. You literally retrain a nervous system that might have been stuck in chronic hyperarousal for years. This expands your biological window of tolerance so that emotional triggers simply bounce off you instead of sending you into a spiral.
Which leads us to a final, pretty provocative thought. Will you continue to view your nervous system as this fixed, uncontrollable state? Or will you learn to play it like a flexible, programmable instrument? From the exact photons of light hitting your melanopsin receptors to the electrolytes in your blood, all the way to the deliberate pacing of your breath, you hold the ultimate authority over your physiology. The science is completely clear, the tools are free, the choice is yours.